Welcome back to the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. Today I'm speaking with Ali, and this episode is up there with one of the longest that I've done. Ali and I had a lot to talk about. There was a lot to fit in, starting with her childhood and how her dream of being a writer was suppressed. And she went on to overcome what she calls accomplishment identity, and she shares her journey of how she managed to overcome that and actually fulfill her dream as an adult. There's lots in here if you're on that journey yourself, or if there's something that you want to pursue in life and maybe something you feel is holding you back. I think Ali's story will give you some inspiration to take that first step towards your own dreams and goals. I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please hit the like button. Every little helps for me growing this podcast, and subscribe. You'll be notified when the next episode comes out. Hi Ali,
Hi, how are
thank
you?
you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story today. There's lots that we're going to talk about and touch on today, and I know that you're essentially living your purpose, your passion now. I can't wait to hear about that. But it was quite a journey for you in getting there.
Yes.
So, do you want to tell us a bit about childhood, what life was like, and I also want you, if you can, talk about the accomplishment identity. Where do you think that stems from as well? So
Yeah,
I'll let you take over.
sure. So, childhood could be summarized as living a lot in my imagination. I was a
Mm,
kid who loved to be barefoot outside, and for a while, I felt like trees were my best friends. I spent a lot of time out there, kind of dancing around them, singing in them, creating kind of soap opera like stories. And the
mm,
trees, kind of stood in as characters. So I'd, walk up to a tree and talk to them as if they were the character in this plot that I had created.
mm,
Definitely a kid who liked to escape into other places or lands, or to make up stories and exist in other places. And that kind of ended up serving me really well. um, because, around 5, when I started to learn my letters and how to write for the first time, I realized how much I loved storytelling. And before, it had just been imagination and kind of play. And then all of
mm,
a sudden, it translated into really wanting to put those things down onto paper. And that's really where the love of writing began. And
mm,
um, writing was this kind of childhood dream. And I was also a kid that was very outspoken, um, and a little bit sassy. And didn't know my audience a lot of the time when I was saying things. I was bold and a little bit brash, and that was kind of my authentic expression. And while that was celebrated at times, there were also times when it was not celebrated. I was told a lot to sharpen my tongue, or to, file my tongue or hold my tongue, all expressions that essentially
mm,
mean to quiet down and stop talking. And, we don't need your opinion right now. Um, and that really made me feel watered down, and like I couldn't be myself. And over time, kind of the next thing that started to chisel away was this dream of growing up to be a writer. That suddenly was no longer cute. And as I got older and I was looking at life after, secondary school, um, they kept saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I kept saying a writer. And I was kept being told that that wasn't practical or realistic, because it wasn't going to pay the bills. And so I felt like I needed to
mm,
adjust that as well. And with all of these kinds of messages, it felt like this very difficult line to walk between showing up for myself, being authentic, being who I was, and then also being who I thought the world, or my parents or my family wanted me to be, which was a little bit more quiet and a little bit less out there, a little bit more kind of straight and narrow path, the practical routes. And that really translated, I think, into getting over involved in extracurriculars and activities to basically make my college application shine. And so
mm,
I ended up overcommitting myself to things, stretching myself too thin, getting really out of alignment with who I was and what I enjoyed, to kind of prove myself, to the world and people around me. And that's really where the overachievement began, was as far back as maybe 13.
Yeah.
And hard to break that later, for sure.
Yeah, I think so many people can relate to that. I can. I was shot down age about 13 when I expressed what I wanted to do when I was older, and it was shot down. I was told I needed a plan B, and I think so many people do. I mean, we're creative beings, but we're not really. This society expects us to be. Most of us end up going into corporate or something that's
Yeah.
more a trade. Rather than being expressing our creativity. So, like you say, you ended up. You say you're in recovery for accomplishment
Yes,
identity.
I
I've
am.
never heard that phrase. I've never heard that phrase, but it sums it up so well.
Yeah.
So, like you say, you went on. You've got 3 degrees, which is bloody amazing, by the way. But it wasn't what was in here. Like you say, you were. It was. I guess you were left feeling. Well, what should I do then? Would you say that? So you were obviously trying different things.
It was. I mean, I think so. Along the way, as I was trying to explore, okay, well, if it's not writing, because I'm told that's not an option, what is it going to be? What else do I love, or what else am I good at? Um,
Mm.
I happened to take a psychology class in high school. It was like intro to psychology. It was an elective. It was kind of new. And I had some familiarity with psychology because in high school, as I was overexerting myself and feeling very out of alignment and feeling very stressed about trying to show up in the world, I ended up in therapy, like seeing a guidance counselor to try to work through these feelings of inadequacy and stress and tension and pressure. And so it was
Mhm.
weirdly timed that I started therapy, and then this intro to psychology class appeared as an option. And that might have been a universal download from the divine. But I started to study psychology, and I loved it. It was all about the way that people show up and their minds and why we do certain things and mindset, behavior. Um, and I was like, well, maybe there's something here, maybe there's something to this that is interesting enough where, oh, lost a earbud, um, where I could do that as something. And so I kind of looked into that. I realized that you could make an okay amount of money as a psychologist, that there were lots of different types of psychologists, lots of different types of mental health professionals. And so I thought, all right, well, this is something that I might be good at, that I'm also interested in. So maybe I'll do that as my bread winning job. And writing will be this thing that I do on the side. And so that became my like laser focus, was okay, this is now my plan. You're telling me that I can't do this, but I'm not going to get rid of it entirely. So I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get 2 degrees. I'm going to get 1 degree in psychology. I'm going to get the other degree in creative writing. And that's what I'm going to do, because I'm not going to let go entirely of this other one, even if I've got to
Mm.
prioritize this new one over it. Um, and so that honestly only fueled the achievement identity, because now now here I am having to get 2 degrees, which is a lot of coursework, and having
Yeah.
to know how to complete it all and by a certain time. And they both have different things, that I have to do in order to prove that I get these degrees. Um, and then in order to get into graduate school for psychology, which is really what was going to help me make the money down the road, I then needed to worry about my next application. So it was like high school was spent trying to get into undergraduate school. Undergraduate school then seemed to be spent in trying to get into graduate school. And it was always the to-do list. Okay, these credits, these internships, this paper, this club, this recommendation letter, and proving, to get to the next milestone. And
Mm.
it caught up with me, um, because by the time I got to grad school, and there was a little bit something else that was going on at the same time, which we can talk about too, but just looking at the academics of it, I got into grad school and I was sitting there in a marriage and family therapy class, because that's what I decided to do, was go get a license for marriage and family therapy. I was miserable, just absolutely
Mm.
miserable. Um, I would be not paying attention, but still getting A's, which felt out of integrity and disingenuous. I was spending more time writing stories about these two professors that were twin sisters in the same program. They lived together, they
Mm.
dressed alike, they were identical. Um, And I created this whole crazy world for them in like the margins of my notebook, instead of taking actual notes. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was when I switched masters. I ended up getting the MFA in creative writing. I felt way more aligned. Um, but that still didn't necessarily mean that I had it all figured out or that it was time to go out on my own.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that this was you because you'd expressed your love for writing and it kind of been, I guess less suppressed, but also I guess shot down? I don't know if you'd use that phrase, but do you feel that maybe by getting all these accomplishments, the degrees, was that to impress your parents to try and make them proud to say, look what I can achieve? Do you feel, because I do feel that we are, I mean that's certainly from my experience, and it went into adulthood as well,
Yeah.
trying to impress and please because what I actually wanted to do wasn't good enough.
Yeah. I think I think from their perspective now as an adult and as a parent, they would say, we were already proud of you. We didn't need you to prove anything to us.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that they also recognized at the time that the messaging that they were giving me made me feel like the original the original path I wanted was inferior. And
Mm-hmm.
because I received that message that it was inferior, I worked myself really hard to do something that would be seen as prestigious or more credible or reputable. Um,
Yeah.
and what's interesting about the choice to get the Master's of Fine Arts, I remember when I called my dad to say I've made a decision to change my master's degree. They knew, both of them, both parents knew that I was not happy in my Master's of Fine Arts or in my marriage and family therapy program. And I hadn't told them yet that I was thinking about the Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing. It was a brand new program. I was still figuring out at the time, could I keep my assistantship to pay for my tuition? There was lots of logistics. So I didn't mention it until I had it all figured out. And when I called that night to let them know, um, there was this long pause after I said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change. And it made me think of like this time in high school when I had gotten accepted into this like adolescent writing conference that was very prestigious. It was competitive. They were only taking so many students across the entire country, and I got accepted. And it happened to be taking place in my home state, which made it really easy to go to. And he and I got into this argument because it was the same weekend as prom, the big, dance where you get all dressed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? Like, I don't care about prom. Like, I want to go to the writing conference. And he thought that I was going to be regretful of missing out on some, like, kind of staple adolescent experience by choosing to go to this writing conference instead of going to prom. We both look back on that and realize that, like, how comical that is that he was actually prioritizing a dance over something more academic and enriching. But at the time,
Mm-hmm.
he really thought like he was protecting my adolescence and my memories. And so here I am now, like flash forward however many years later, and that long pause, and I'm thinking, is he going to tell me what he told me way back then? But instead, what he said was, how are you going to make money? And that didn't seem all that much better than how come you don't want to go to prom? But it was at least something that made me realize that what he is fearful of as the parent is my financial security. Because if he's not responsible for me anymore. So how am I going to be responsible for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I replied in that moment, I don't know, but I know I won't fail.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this. And at that point, it wasn't asking for permission, even though that's what I've always wanted. It was just saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm switching masters, and this is what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unfortunately, as much gumption as I had in that moment, I did switch master's programs, but then it was just a new wave of life events after that kind of pushed writing to the side or had me seeking permission elsewhere for other things. So I was not quite done the journey to really get where I wanted to be. That was like one really crucial kind of milestone or moment, um, but it wasn't quite enough to kick me in the pants to like
Mhm.
go all in and just continue to listen to my intuition.
Mhm. And I think that's an important point you've just made as well about, your dad, he just wanted security for you.
Yeah.
And I think because when, we don't know any better, all we know at the time is that our dream is being, you know, I, well, suppressed but shot down. I hate that term, shot down, but it's, you know, but it's coming from a good place. We can feel resentment, hurt as well, but I think it's important, like you just said, he just wanted security for you. And I think, we don't, unless you are thinking outside the box, we do very much in society have this, leave school, go to university, do something stable or stable.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's just an important point that I wanted to touch on as well, that it is coming from a good place. And, obviously they just wanted the best for you. But you ended up going to Australia as well to study. And do you want
Yes.
to tell us a bit about your experience when you went to Australia?
Yeah. So what I was alluding to earlier about going from undergrad to graduate school and it all catching up with me, in
Yeah,
between
yeah.
there, um, I studied abroad my junior year of college, so before graduating. And I was really excited about going to Australia because I had had a pen pal when I was in the third grade from Papua New Guinea, and the teachers at the time had said that that was a part of Australia. I don't actually think that's geographically correct, but that's what they said. And so I just had it in my head like someday I'm going to go to Australia and like meet the people.
Mhm,
Not this particular pen pal, but I kind of became really fixated on that place during that time. And so
mhm,
when I got to college and study abroad opportunities were in front of me, I was like, I'm totally doing this. Like, now's the time to travel. Like, I'm not settled down. I'm not rooted to any one place. Like, I feel like I'm invincible. Um, and then the year before, I had lost my roommate tragically to this freak accident, and she had died, when we were 19. And that experience really shook me and also let me know that like you get to do life once and you don't know how long life is, so you better do the things that you want to do because there's no guarantee that tomorrow is going to happen. So live your life to the fullest, try to have no regrets. um and so as crazy now, you know that I think about, man, I didn't really know much at that time. I thought I did, but I didn't. And I'm going to travel
mhm,
halfway around the world, you know um or really across the world, by myself with not a single other student going from my particular university.
mhm,
But I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And I'm shocked that I convinced my parents, but I think having watched me kind of grieve and process the loss of my roommate the year before, I think that they understood on some level that I needed a change of scenery, I needed a change of pace, I needed to reclaim life, youth, vitality. Um, and I think that they knew that I had a strong enough head on my shoulders that I could do it, that I could handle it. So I was there January of 2006 to May or June of 2006, one whole semester. And the unfortunate part of that experience was about day 11 that I was there, I was sexually assaulted by an acquaintance on campus at one of the dormitory buildings. And not only did it change the nature of that experience for the rest of the time that I was there, um, but it really shifted my world forever, but certainly had a really intense impact for at least the next, I would say, 3 to 4 years. Um,
mhm,
really beginning with kind of not speaking up about what happened and kind of repressing what happened and trying to control my body through extreme exercise while I was there in Australia. But then by really repressing it so badly when I got back, that PTSD crept up the following
mhm,
year, a handful of months later. And I kept pushing that down and saying, like, I'm not going to deal with it right now because I got to graduate. I've got credits left and I've got a thesis to write and I've got graduate applications to fill out. And so it was really like a year and some change by the time I actually brought myself to therapy and started working through that. And it was probably year 3 after it happened before I actually told my parents and my brother what had occurred. Um, Somewhere between the assault and then I had told my sister, but I had sworn her to secrecy and silence. So there was these like little pockets of people who kind of knew, and they were all sworn to silence, and they just didn't know how to help me, because I wasn't ready to help me. It was too much.
Yeah. So you went to therapy and obviously to address that. Is that, I mean, how did that affect you going forward in relationships? You know, obviously you're going to talk a bit about your marriage and then obviously divorce and remarriage. So how did that affect, you know, going forward?
Well, interestingly enough, there was somebody that I was in a relationship with when I went to Australia, and he was one of the first people that I told. And it was devastating because I don't, I, in hindsight, I realize now that he never believed me, that he thought that I had cheated on him and was calling it an assault so that I didn't have to own up to my behavior and my bad choice. And in his mind, because I had brought myself to this person's room to use the restroom, I had placed myself in a vulnerable situation. And so, therefore, like, without saying it in so many words, it was my fault. Um, but I couldn't see any of those things then. Uh, about after maybe 1 or 2 weeks of like trying to process through with him, across the world on like phone, phone cards, standing at a payphone in the middle of campus, trying to like have whispered conversations, about
Mhm.
this really traumatic thing. He finally said, like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's put it behind us, and like basically let's pretend that it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm on campus with my assailant, and he and his, group of people, um, they sneer at me and call me names when they see me anytime on campus. And I felt like I couldn't go places. I felt like I couldn't go out. I felt like I couldn't drink ever again. Not that drinking was entirely the problem or anything, but I was even more cautious of
Mhm.
just doing anything that would potentially put me back in harm's way.
Yeah.
Because I spent the whole semester just replaying, like, how did I let that happen? So there was a lot of self blame as well. Like, I have a good head on my shoulders. I'm smarter than this. Um, I knew all the things to be watching out for. Like, I didn't drink that much. I had my glass covered so nobody could slip anything in. I wasn't with a stranger. I mean, just all kinds of beliefs and thoughts. Um, and when I got back from Australia, I think because of that repression and because this boyfriend stayed with me and we were just going to pretend that it didn't happen, um, we picked up our, intimate relationship as soon as I got back. And I didn't find that to be very traumatic or scary. And I think it's because I had already been with him and he was safe and he was my person, right? Um, but when I got to grad school and he and I were no longer together, and the idea of dating was now open and available to me, it was terrifying to be with any new person. I could not bring myself to like sometimes even kiss somebody else, and
Mhm.
I didn't feel excited about physical touch or intimacy. And
Yeah.
that was really when nightmares set in. I became very obsessive and compulsive about locking the door of my apartment umpteen times, even though there had been no break in or anything in the
Mhm.
actual reality of my assault. Yet
Mhm.
there was this detachment from safety and control and security. And so it was like
Mhm.
anything that I could do to try to control my surroundings, I tried to control. But my paranoia and my anxiety and my anger got so bad during graduate school while I was processing and really getting in front of it that, I mean, I had like all kinds of things on my person when I would walk places or go for a run. Whistles, pens that were actually knives, lipstick that was actually daggers. This key ring thing that looked like a cat, but you put your fingers through the holes and the ears are actually to like get your assailant in the eyes. And all of these things were like to protect me from the potential future stranger that might, come after me, even though I knew my assailant hadn't been a stranger, and um, that the likelihood of being assaulted by a stranger is actually very, very small in comparison to the number of date or acquaintance violence. So it
Yeah.
was just like all these things were swimming around, and um, I started to question whether or not I would ever have children because the relationship to that part of my body was very damaged. Um, it was a lot. It was very intense. And then the rape became something that felt like this dirty secret that I didn't know when to share with the potential romantic partner across from me. Do I let them know that on the first date? Do I put that in my profile online? Do I only go to, go on dates in public places until I'm ready to be alone with them and then tell them? Like, how is it going to come across? Are they going to blame me too? Are they going to see me as damaged goods? I mean, there were so many psyche related things around this um, that felt unmanageable and unwieldy. And for a while, I thought, I will never date normally again.
Yeah, I would trust as well. I think trust, everything you've just said there, it kind of comes down to trust as well, doesn't it? And obviously, you like you say, it wasn't a stranger; it was someone that you knew of them, and your trust was broken. So yeah, I mean, so I imagine that would have a big effect on
Yeah.
relationships and starting new relationships. So what about your marriage then? And you spoke about, obviously you didn't know if you were going to have kids, but you did eventually get married and have a child.
I did. I did. Yeah. I mean, part of that is being committed to therapy. It was, finding somebody that felt safe enough with. Um, Time does have a way of easing pain. It doesn't take it away. It doesn't remove it entirely. But you gain new perspective and understanding and peace the further away from an event that you get. Um, so I met my first husband at my best friend's wedding. Um, at that time, because of the processing I had been doing in therapy around my assault, as well as a lot of prior relationships before that, that also were not actually very healthy. Um,
Mm.
I was kind of looking at relationships in this, unfortunately, very mathematical kind of way. Um, all right, so here, all these people on the left are people that I've been with before, and they all share these similar characteristics that have proven to not be good for me. So looking over here on the right, maybe what I really need to be looking for is somebody who meets, these characteristics. It was kind of ruling out the idea of like chemistry or connection, and almost more like this person makes a lot more sense, like, cognitively. Um, I haven't been figuring it out when I've gone by heart or chemical connection or attraction. So maybe I need to like wise up and go for somebody who feels safe and smart, and that's not to say that he's not a wonderful person. He is. He was hardworking. He was family oriented. He was, professionally motivated. He believed in creating a very wonderful home environment. And when I did, while we were dating, tell him about the assault, he was extremely gracious, understanding, accepting, and not blaming, not judging. Um, so all things considered, a very good partner. What I wasn't accounting for at the time was that I was not healed in a full, complete way. Um, I hadn't really reacquainted with myself. I lost myself a long time ago, probably during the first serious relationship I had at 15 that turned out to not be so healthy. And I think probably ingrained some very bad ideas of what a relationship looks like. Um,
Mm.
and I don't think I ever got over that. And so it's like I came into my marriage with a lot of baggage. baggage that had not been sorted, had not been organized, had not been sifted, um, certainly had not been healed. And with that, the inability to say what I needed or what I wanted. And if I did say what I needed and wanted and it wasn't accepted, instead of fighting for what I wanted and needed, I just shut down and
Mm-hmm.
found myself in a place again of trying to fit into a box or water myself down in a way that would be more acceptable. Um, and ultimately ended up lying to myself and lying to him in the process, um, which is a shitty thing to do. Uh, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't do it intentionally, and I wasn't even doing it consciously for a while. I was just like going through the motions. I got into this state of being used to being out of alignment, used to operating as somebody else, that the world was more accepting of. Um, Trying to do the things by the boxes that we're told we're supposed to check at certain points in our life, especially as women. I was
Mm-hmm.
looking at all of my friends around me getting married, buying houses, having babies, and feeling like those things are like gonna pass me by. Like it's time to get settled. And it's time to give up on this fairy tale idea of marriage and partnership, you know. Um, I didn't realize at the time that you could have both, like that you could have a little bit of chemical attraction and also have made a really smart choice. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like I became pregnant. I had my first child, and then there's just something really magnificent about parenting and becoming a mom. But now it was like, there is no lying to myself or to my spouse anymore, because I literally have a mirror walking around who is going to
Mm-hmm.
follow in my footsteps. Whatever I model, they will then become. And that was like a huge wake up call. If I
Mm-hmm.
want them to know happiness, if I want them to know their truth, if I want them to know how to follow their dreams and brave their path, if I want them to know what a relationship looks like where, the people can't keep their hands off each other, and, you know, there's this beautiful essence around the couple, right? That makes the children go, ugh, but then eventually appreciate, I didn't feel like I was
Mm-hmm.
modeling any of that. I was unhappy with myself. I was unhappy with my job. I was unhappy in my marriage. I was really happy
Mm-hmm.
being a mom, but I wasn't happy with how I was modeling how to eventually be in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
that is what parenting is. You are getting them ready to be in the world, because they will not be in your household and under your care for their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when things really started to unravel, because I couldn't now unsee all the things that I was seeing. I couldn't unsee how unhappy I was, that I felt like I was living a lie, even though I had a loving and committed partner, and I had a beautiful home, and I had a healthy child, and we had jobs and benefits and cars. And for a while, I just felt guilty about not wanting what I had when everything was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, you know, bit by bit, like things just kind of started to chip off, and break away. And, and then, I got pregnant a second time, and I lost the baby in a miscarriage. And that instance, that experience reminded me of the helplessness and lack of control that I had when I had been assaulted. And so it was like poof, like feeling like pulled right back in. And I could cope with it better because of what I learned from the assault, but it was just being steeped in trauma all over
Mm-hmm.
again. And because the marriage was starting to crack, that kind of traumatic event wasn't really going to be the thing that was going to help us. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so things just kind of really spiraled from there.
Yeah, you talk about how everything came crashing down at the same time with
Yeah.
marriage and work, and you had your miscarriage. And I also wanted to ask, because you spoke about in your book, you speak about it was a Catholic upbringing,
Yeah.
and but your book is called Dear Universe, I Get It Now. So I imagine you're more in the spirituality now. So how did that? When did that come about? because I know that when we're hit with challenges and hardships like you did through, during that time, sometimes that's when spirituality can enter our life. So
Mm-hmm.
can you, how did you use that, or if that was in your life, to come out of that place,
Yeah.
when everything came crashing down?
So I would say that my spirituality has probably been there even before I remember going to church specifically. Like I remembered I was really fascinated by Jesus, like super fascinated. Like, wait a minute, this guy can walk on water? No freaking way. Like Jesus felt like a superhero. Um, and I remember having this, I can still picture it in my head. It was like this bright yellow cover and Jesus is on the front, like walking with his disciples, I think. And it's like this children's workbook of like activities and things to learn about Jesus. That is really my first memory before like church or being Catholic.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so I think I have this spirit that's always believed that there is something higher than us, whether you believe Jesus is the Messiah or just a prophet or just some man that everybody likes to talk about. um, I believe that there's something greater and higher. The Catholicism was really pushed because that's how my parents grew up from their parents, right? And so they
Mhm.
indoctrinated us in, and we went to church every Sunday and we made our sacraments and we went through the church. Probably by the time I was making my confirmation, one of the sacraments, which at the time was around maybe age 15, and you're supposed to promise yourself to the Catholic Church, this is going to be your one true faith. I didn't want to do it then because I didn't always agree with all of the Catholic Church's worldviews and perspectives on a variety of social issues that I felt very passionately about. And I felt like it was dishonest to promise myself in this sacrament to the Catholic Church when I didn't 100% fully believe in all the things that they were promoting. But when I expressed that, it was not met with a lot of
Mhm.
acceptance.
I can imagine, yeah.
So I got confirmed and and then tried in college to continue to be Catholic and go to Catholic services on campus. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it regularly. And then in grad school, I was like, you know what? This just doesn't feel good. It doesn't serve me. I'm going to try going somewhere else. So I found a non-denominational church nearby and I loved it. The people were beautiful. The pastor was amazing. He had the best sermons. I always walked away feeling like I got something out of what he was
Mm.
saying, which I can't say that I really got growing up in the church. Um, and so that was probably when I started to explore spirituality or religion outside of what I knew to try to figure out
Mhm.
maybe where I belonged. And certainly through like college when I lost my roommate and then my assault, you know, I was always praying. I always believed that God was looking out for me. I love that Footprints poem, which is basically like the whole time you're complaining on the beach or whatever, that like you're walking by yourself, and then eventually you come to find that there's only one set of footprints. And the end of the poem basically is like, that's because I was carrying you. And so you feel like you're alone and you're walking, but really this whole time something else has been there always.
Mhm.
And I've believed that for a really long time. Um, when I got married the first time, he was also raised Catholic. He was committed to us raising our son Catholic. So we went back to the Catholic Church, and I reasoned with myself that as long as some sort of faith foundation was in my son's life, that was what mattered. And he could eventually grow up to make his own choices. I wasn't going to force him to remain a committed Catholic if that's not what he wanted. But we got him
Mhm.
baptized. We started on this path. Um, and then I found myself again at this crossroads when we were going through the separation and divorce of being like, not only have I felt hypocritical sitting in this pew every weekend, not 100% committed to the Catholic teachings, but now I'm going through a divorce, which is really not okay in the Catholic Church, even now.
Mhm.
And so once again, I found myself like, what do I do here? I'm
Mhm.
spiritual. I believe in this higher power, but I don't believe necessarily in this particular institution. Um, and then we went through mediation as a part of the divorce because we didn't want to use lawyers. We didn't want it to get messy. And we agreed that we were going to raise our son Catholic because it was super important to him. So I'm still
Mhm.
on this journey of
Yeah.
balancing you know, organized religion and institutions with my own particular belief system that veers from such a
Yeah.
structured, ritualistic kind of practice. Um, so Dear Universe, I Get It Now, my book is really like, it's a more open-minded approach to, I don't really know what's out there, but it might not just be God, and it might not just be Jesus, and it might
Mm.
not just be, whatever other person's religion says that there is for a deity. Um, Maybe there's a bunch of different forces that are working together. I have no idea. All I know is that there is something greater,
Yeah.
that we all are going to speak to, I think, at some point.
Hmm. So, how obviously you've just mentioned your book, and that came when you just this you there came a point when you realized that you wanted to, well, you gave up your job and you pursued your passion. So tell us about that, because I did that last year. I left the corporate. I went to university and studied business management and quickly realized that I did not want to work in the corporate world. And again, this stems back to my dreams being shot down as well. So last year, I what I call took the scary leap and quit my job. And you did the same thing.
Yeah,
You left work and thought, I'm gonna go. It's a scary thing to do
it
because
is.
I've done it. But I do believe that when you do pursue what's in here and you take that scary leap, I guess you could say the universe will catch you. Whatever,
That's right.
that's
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell me about that. Tell me how did you get to that place? Because I want the listeners as well who are they've got something in here, but it's scary
Yeah.
to go out of your comfort zone into
Yeah.
the unknown.
Yeah.
So tell me how you got to that point.
So so the marriage falling apart, the miscarriage, that was all 2000, early 2017. Um, Probably that fall, as 2017 is kind of coming to end, 2018 is just around the corner. I was
Mm,
supposed to be getting this promotion at work. And at that point, it was like the only thing left to kind of look forward to, if you will. Um, the all of the paperwork for the divorce was like in process. I was living with my parents after having this beautiful home. Hadn't lived with my parents since high school, so that really felt like a
mhm,
step back. I was getting used to only having my son half of the time, which was heart wrenching, that first year. And so it was like, oh man, like, and now I'm a single earner. Like, I've only got my income now to rely on, and I got to get myself up out of my parents' place. You know,
mm,
um, I got to get this promotion. Like, this promotion could mean like good things for what I need in my life right now. Even though I wasn't really in love with my job, I thought, well, if I get the promotion, I'll be happier there because the promotion will be doing more of things that are aligned with my skill set, and it was still an up and coming company and all those things. Um, and then I got pulled into this routine meeting with my manager, and I went in thinking it was like same old, same old. Like, this is when we meet, we're going to talk about the same things that we always talk about and whatever. And instead, he ends up telling me that I've basically fallen out of favor with the executives at the top, doesn't give me a reason why, and that the promotion I've been promised, which is a job that I've developed myself, like I've literally created my own job description. He tells me that they're actually going to be interviewing external candidates. So, number one, not getting the promotion. Number two, not even going to be considered for the job that I created. And then number three, he goes on to tell me that some of the roles that I have are going to actually be taken away, taken off of my plate. So I'm getting demoted in responsibilities, even though I'm the lowest person in the company because I'm an administrative
mhm,
assistant. There's no one lower than me. And then the kicker being the fourth thing that ended up coming, and I don't remember if it was that day or if it was a few weeks later, but they changed my manager to a person in the company that I had explicitly expressed I would not work for. And I'm pretty sure that all of those things, for whatever reason, were tests to see if I would just leave. I don't think that they
mm,
wanted to fire me because then they would have had to have paid me unemployment wages. But if I quit, they wouldn't owe me anything.
Mm.
And I was like beside myself. And of course, as a parent, I wasn't going to just say, well, screw you guys, I'm out, with nothing left to go to. So I had no choice but to kind of grit and bear it while I figured out what my next move was going to be. But that was like the
Mhm.
last straw. It was like the last piece of the house that was standing. And then that too had been knocked down. And I'm just like standing kind of in the rubble of this structure that used to
Mhm.
exist, naked, and just like, well, I've got nothing else. I've got nothing else. I've got no direction but up. And somewhere in that time frame, I kind of threw my hands up in the air and I said, all right, I give up. I quit. What do you want? You meaning universe. What do you want? Because I've clearly been missing the boat. I've screwed up all these
Mhm.
things. This is not what early adulthood is supposed to look like. You must know better than I do because nothing's going right. So you tell me. And it was like when I relinquished that kind of control and I basically said, I don't know that the 9 to 5 is right for me. I don't know that this job is right for me. I don't know what is right for me. Tell me what is right for me because I'm confused. I clearly don't know. Um,
Mm.
and that was like the one thing that knocked down like the dominoes. Um, it was like the right books found me, the right podcasts found me, the right people found me. I mean, and then all of these things were all pointing in one direction to go out on my own, right? So that was happening here. The second thing that was happening was that I was so lost and out of my mind about what was going on that I went back to the one thing that's always felt comfortable and safe, and that's writing. And I didn't see how these things were connected at the time because there was too much grief and loss and change happening. But I started to blog for myself. Then I got brave enough to blog for a mom's blog in the state. And I felt really good. And I started to reconnect with who I was. And then over here, as I was thinking about, well, what does it look like to go out on my own? What could I do? Where could I go? One of those right people that were in my life at the time basically said to me, well, why don't you become a virtual assistant and start your own business from home? And I was like, what are you even saying? I don't know what a virtual assistant is. Um, what do they do? And she kind of told me, and in her perspective, a virtual assistant was very administrative. And I just hated the idea of that because that was where I had just been. Um, and I wasn't happy there. The thing that was intriguing was the working for myself and working from home. And so I was like, well, it's probably better than where I am. And so she was like,
Mm.
why don't you just talk to this woman that I know that runs a training program and just get some more information? And because I trusted her, I did that. I went, I talked to this other person. What I learned from them was that I didn't have to be administrative with my services. I could focus on writing. And as soon as she said that, that was it. Instant download from the divine. Like, do it, please. Stop
Mhm.
wasting your time and avoiding the thing
Mm.
that you've always been wanting to do. And what was amazing is I was thinking, I went and got a master's degree in writing, and not a single person that was a professor in that program ever told me that I could make a business using my writing skills. Not a single person. Because they were
Mm.
so blinded that there were only like these 2 tracks that you could go on with an MFA that it never even occurred to them to think outside the box. But she was like,
Mm.
no, you can make a whole business out of that and you can make really good money. And I was
Yeah.
just like, my mind was blown. Like I couldn't
Mm.
even. So that was like the fall of 2018. Um, so I started the program. I formed my business in November as an LLC. I started taking clients in December. And by April of 2019, I had saved up 2 months of living expenses, gave my notice, and walked out the door. Hope, prayer,
Mm.
and 2 months of living expenses. That was it.
Yeah.
And said, all right,
Well.
I'm doing it. Like, I'm just going for it. There's nowhere to go. There's no further down to go. So the
Mhm.
only way to go is up. And I haven't looked back. I've evolved a lot since then. My business has changed so much. What I do has changed so much. But that was how I got on the path. And it was like, as soon as I did that, it was like, I kind of think of like Peter Pan and his shadow, right? They're like always separated and Peter's always trying to catch the shadow.
Mm.
And it's like, I think that like my shadow, that girl in the trees as a kid, who knew more about herself than I had for years, who knew that she wanted to write, but who I had rejected, right? It was like she came floating back in. And there was this beautiful integrity and authenticity that happened
Mhm.
where everything started to lock in and I felt like myself again.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that what you just said because I work with people. I do inner child work with my clients, and I always say that child is still in there. And if we suppress and don't let them come out and express themselves, if we didn't get a chance to as a child, which most of us didn't, and it is, all still in there. Um, yeah, and that will manifest in other ways, and undesired emotions and actions and thoughts. So yeah, I love that you just touched on that as well. And you're a great example for anyone, and I really encourage people, anyone what's in here, to take that first scary step, because
Yeah.
there's growth on the other side. And if you just trust that everything will work out like you did, um but I know there's I think there's just that block sometimes, isn't there, that you don't, it's the unknown.
Yeah. Yes.
But and I think when things are falling apart as well, and you're another great example. When things are falling apart, sometimes it's because things are falling together and things are coming together. But
Absolutely.
everything in the past has to break down
Yeah.
for that to happen. And now you're helping other people write their books and tell their stories as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and how you're helping people now with writing?
Yeah. So went out on my own in 2019, and very closely after that, though I was doing copywriting and content writing services for people, I realized that that's not where I wanted to stay. Like very early on, I knew where I wanted to evolve to, and I wanted to evolve to helping other people write their own books. But in knowing that, I also recognized that, well, I can't do something for somebody else that I haven't first done for myself. So
Mm,
that was really what got me on the path to work on Dear Universe, I Get It Now, was a way of like doing for myself what I hoped to do later for others. And what was interesting is as I started working on that book, um, the same person who brought me into her training program to learn how to start my own business from home asked me to ghostwrite her book, her first business book. And so all of a sudden I
mhm,
found myself working on two books at the same time, right? Because this is how organic and like true manifestation, I think, happens. Like when you're following your intuition, things just fall into place. And
mhm,
towards the end of working on both of those books, I got introduced to somebody who wanted to write a book, but she wanted to write it herself and she needed a coach. And so I became her coach. And so organically, business evolved into these spaces. Um, and it was like, okay, like listening to the fact that like this is where I'm supposed to be. And so now I think since 2020, which is really when I started to kind of like inch my way that direction and kind of leave copywriting and content writing behind, um, I've worked with over 20 people in the last 2 years, all over the country on their books. And some of them are still in progress, and some of them have been published, and some of them are about to publish. And they're kind of all over the map in terms of where they're at in their stage. But, you know, I think the biggest thing that I offer to people is actually maybe not the writing coaching or the writing itself. It's the holding the container and holding the space for them to show up in their own truth and who they are, and to say all the
mhm,
things that have happened to them and have somebody on the other side listen,
mhm,
acknowledge, validate, not judge, say, I'm really sorry. I hear you. I see you. Yeah, that had to have been really tough. And that is healing for people.
mhm,
And so is sharing their story. And so the book ends up being the byproduct. The book ends up being a tangible result of what we're doing. But what we're really doing is being real with each other. And they're acknowledging that they can honor their experience. And honestly, that though they've been through some serious shit, they are stronger, more powerful, and more beautiful as a result, even though it was terrible. And even though maybe it seems nonsensical, and we don't want to believe that any God or higher being would make that happen to us, when we find the silver lining and we see the positive or collateral blessings that occur, we can actually integrate some of those fractured selves back in. And that is through openness and sharing and talking about our story. And so there's a lot of light work that I do in producing these books with clients. And honestly, it's just being real with them, being real and caring.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, we'll put the link here for anyone to go and get your book, and I do encourage that they do.
Yeah.
But also, you've got the 5-step writing guide, which anyone can go and download, I believe, from your website, which I'll be doing as well
Yes.
for me. But I wanted to ask actually before we finish up, what does the future hold for you? I mean, what is it that how far do you want to take this? What
Yeah.
do you want to do with your work?
So the thing that is cropping up most recently is that I want to create, I have this whole vision and it's huge. So I'm going to see if I can say this eloquently and succinctly.
Mm-hmm.
I want to create a group program for people who feel silenced and marginalized in their experience, that combines the writing of their own book with the healing and self-awareness that I believe is important to actually write that book well. So instead of it just being kind of a traditional book writing program where they come in and they get coached and they develop their manuscript and they go on to publish it, I want to make available to them things like human design, trauma informed care, um, learning about their auras and essences, getting in touch with their inner child, maybe going and speaking to a counselor, about some things that they haven't processed yet. So it's the emotional lifting and pieces that I believe that we really need, and the writing, together in one program. So they'll still
Yeah.
walk away with a book, but ultimately I want them to walk away feeling like a more healed and stronger and empowered person to then do the work in the world that they want to do with that book, whether for them that's speaking or having book proceeds go to one of their favorite organizations or whatever it is. So that's kind of one direction I want to go with the business, and then get rid of some of my other services and go all in with that kind of work. Um, and then I want to write more of my own books, and I want to speak. Podcasts are wonderful. I love this. I'd like to get on some stages. I'd like to be in front of some people. I really, really want to help people feel braver and more themselves, because life's too short. We're not here a long time. Um,
Yeah.
so let's be who we're meant to be while we're here and not be something else.
Mm-hmm. And what about obviously all this work you're doing now and you found your passion, but is there anything else that you feel just I always like to ask something that we're longing for, because we're never there. There's never that place where we get to and we think, that's it, I'm here now. There's always something else that we strive for, or, and that I'm really, work is great, but what about personally, just for you? Is
Yeah.
there anything that you feel longing for?
Um, Honestly, more spaciousness, exploration, and quiet. I'm still very much driven by the accomplishment identity. Like, that's a real
Mm-hmm.
stickler for me as an entrepreneur. It's like serving because it can make me very successful, but it's also very
Mm-hmm.
harming because it can keep me trapped to the desk or the office longer than I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, it's more space in the calendar. It's more time to explore things, to be with people. It's getting creative in other ways, not just writing. I love to do crafts. I love to make things with my hands. Um, so it's more of those things, not being so much in my brain with, strategy or analytics or serving that client or, working on the business, but just more being in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Ali, for coming on. I've loved hearing your story today and for sharing as well and for being vulnerable. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for listening to Ali's story and her journey to finally fulfilling the dream that she wanted when she was a child. All details on how to contact Ali are in the description below. The 5-step writing guide that Ali has created is also there, along with the link to go and get her book. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe. You'll be notified when the next episode comes out soon.